Hello, my geniuses. Welcome to another biochemistry lecture series. Today is a great science tutor Lorenzo, and today we'll be talking about the comparison between hexokinase and glucokinase. So, in our last video, we talked about the glycolysis pathway, and the next one we did the TCA pathway. So, here we want to give a very important enzyme, the differences between hexokinase and glucokinase. So, if you are new to my channel, make sure to subscribe and turn on your post notification button so that anytime I drop any video, you'll be sure to be notified. If you want me to make a video for you, drop it down in the comment section. I promise I'll make the video when I see it. So let us jump right into the video now. Yeah. So now we want to just compare. We just want to compare the similarities and the difference between hexokinase and glucokinase. So first of all, to introduce what hexokinase and glucokinase is, they are enzymes that catalyze the first irreversible steps of glycolysis. I get it now. The first irreversible step of glycolysis. So remember that from glucose to glucose you have to phosphorylate here. So when there's presence of glucose, are you getting now? The glucose is absorbed into the tissues, and when it's absorbed into the tissues, are you getting it is being phosphorylated to give glucose phosphate by hexokinase or what glucokinase. So this first step, the step one of glycolysis, is an irreversible step, and the first irreversible step, because there are three, step 1, step 3 and step 10. Are you getting that? So go watch my video on that very well so you understand step 1, step 3 and step 10. So these steps are irreversible and they are they are committed. So when the enzyme or when the substrate have passed this level, it cannot go back again. Instead there will be accumulation. You get it? That's also important. So here now there's phosphorylation of glucose at glucose at carbon 6 to get glucose phosphate utilizing what? ATP. I get it now. Although both of them catalyze the same reaction, but they differ in tissue distribution. They differ in affinity. The affinity for glucose, one like glucose more, one do not like glucose more, and their regulation and their physiological function. So they are differ and they are different in all this stuff. But hey, what do? They phosphorylate glucose at the carbon 6 to give glucose phosphate. So we want to look at the difference. Are you getting it now? So get it. What's happened now for glucose? When glucose is absorbed by the tissue, there was phosphorylated at carbon 6 you give glucose phosphate, converting what? ATP to what? ADP. So when you break down ADP to ADP by hexokinase or glucokinase, you get what? Glucose phosphate. So now let's look at the difference between them. Are you getting it now? Let's look at, so what's the alternative name now? Now watch. So we have hexokinase. So hexokinase is used for all carbohydrate metabolism, especially all when you want to metabolize fructose, galactose, mannose. When you want to catabolize any monosaccharide, you use what? Glucose. You use hexokinase. So hexokinase is used in various forms, but the alternative form of hexokinase is type 1, type 2 and type 3. So hexokinase, he has an alternative name which is type 1, type 2 and type 3. But if we are looking at glucokinase now, glucokinase is a type of hexokinase that is type 4. So hexokinase means all 6 sugars. So everybody that has carbon 6, glucose, fructose, galactose, mannose, all of them are 6 carbon sugar molecule. So since they are 6 carbon sugar molecule, what happens? They all use hexokinase. Are you getting now? So we have hexokinase type 1, type 2, type 3, type 4. Are you getting now? So the normal hexokinase that is used in various reactions is type 1, type 2, type 3, while glucokinase is a type of type 4 hexokinase. So the next one is our tissue distribution. Are you getting now? Tissue distribution. Now basic all tissue have what? Hexokinase. All tissue have hexokinase, but you can see glucokinase in the liver and the beta cells of the pancreas. You can see glucokinase in the liver and the beta cells of the pancreas. Now the next one is substrate specificity. Are you getting now? So they act on all 6 sugar molecules, all 6 sugar. Everybody that have 6 carbon sugar molecule, you can see hexokinase there. Example, you can have glucose, fructose, mannose, galactose. You can see hexokinase there. But in glucokinase now, it's specific to glucose. So it's specific, you can only see it in glucose. Specificity to glucose, that's why you can see glucokinase. So when the glucose is present specifically, you can use glucose, but hexokinase you can see it in most people. The next one is what? Affinity. Which one has high affinity? So now hexokinase has high affinity for glucose. So immediately there's a little amount of glucose, you see hexokinase there. High affinity in the sense that is when you see glucose, hexokinase will be coming fast. Even for a smaller amount of glucose, you see hexokinase. Are you getting that? Not that because the name is glucokinase, it means that it loves glucose. No, it only comes when the glucose level is high. But hexokinase comes when the glucose level is low, which means it has high affinity. So the next one is what? Kmax. That is the Machilin's constant or Machilin's value. So hexokinase has low Kmax. I get it now. It has low Kmax. Why? Because of its affinity. It has high affinity for glucose, which means it has low Kmax. I get it now. So which means a small amount of glucose, hexokinase can act on it. So a small amount of glucose can bring forth hexokinase, which means it has high affinity, but it has low Kmax. What is the meaning of having low Kmax? I told you, for it to have low Kmax, which means a small amount of glucose can bring out what? Hexokinase action. But glucokinase has high Kmax, which means there must be large amount of glucose for glucokinase to work. Are you getting that? So when you talk about Kmax, which is the Michaelis constant is low for hexokinase because only a small amount of glucose can give the function of hexokinase, but it has high why glucokinase have high Kmax? Because it's large amount of glucose. That is the amount of it. Vmax now also it has low Vmax. Are you getting now? Hexokinase has low Vmax and low Kmax. Low Vmax in the sense of the velocity of metabolism is low. Are you getting now? Which means when it sees small amount of glucose, it works on it. Are you getting now? Why the other one has high Vmax and high Kmax? Because it needs large amount, and when it's doing large amount of glucose, it works variably. The next one is the activity at low glucose concentration. I get, like I said, also when there's a small amount of glucose, maybe it ate something that is very small, the body releases hexokinase, so it has high affinity, which means it can come at low glucose concentration. Why? The nucleus of the liver only release glucokinase at high glucose level. Don't forget. The next one is the activity of high glucose concentration. Like I tell you now, for hexokinase only works when there's low glucose level, but when there's high glucose level, glucokinase comes, so it's variably low glucose hexokinase, high glucose glucokinase. Inhibition by glucose 6-phosphate. So now listen, hexokinase is inhibited by glucose 6-phosphate. So when glucose is converted to glucose 6-phosphate at high amount of glucose 6-phosphate, hexokinase is inhibited. But for glucokinase is not inhibited by glucose 6-phosphate, it's inhibited by fructose 6-phosphate. So hexokinase is inhibited by glucose 6-phosphate, while glucokinase is inhibited by fructose 6-phosphate. Regulation, like I told you now, always remember it. There is an inhibition of hexokinase by glucose 6-phosphate. Also apart from glucose 6-phosphate, glucagon also inhibits it too. That is hormonal. Glucagon also inhibits it too, and some other things. But for glucokinase, what happens? It is inhibited by fructose 6-phosphate and also by glucagon. Effect on insulin. Hexokinase has low effect on insulin. Are you getting now? Which means when there's presence of insulin, it doesn't really affect hexokinase. Are you getting now? It doesn't really affect hexokinase. But for glucokinase, it increases the function of glucokinase, because when you take high amount of glucose, what happens? Glucose brings forth what? Insulin from the beta cells of the pancreas. So it stimulates, because insulin helps also reduce glucose level. Are you getting that? So insulin comes when the glucose level is high in order to break them down, taking glucose and distribute it to all tissues. So when there's high amount of glucose, insulin comes to break them down, distribute them to all tissues, which means high amount of glucose, we are using glucokinase, which means insulin induces more of glucokinase than hexokinase. Insulin comes when there's glucose. Are you getting that? Help also reduce the blood sugar level. So when there's small amount of glucose, we bring hexokinase, and when there's hexokinase only comes when there's small amount of glucose, and when it comes, it just want to reduce the sugar level, but the glucose level is always low, so it invariably insulin has low effect on it because the glucose level is not high, it's still normal. You get it now? So the next one is the physiological. I get it now. So what does hexokinase do? Hexokinase provides glucose for tissue for energy production. I get it now. So when there's glucose in the body, we need small amount of glucose to give ATP. So if you have not eaten for a long time and you take small amount of carbohydrates, well, that small amount of carbohydrates will just produce ATP for you, very small. You don't need a large issue or large formation. It's so easy. But when you are having glucokinase, and glucokinase helps to maintain what glucose homeostasis. So when there's high amount of glucose, insulin helps you break it down. I get it now. Insulin helps to break it down to make sure that the sugar level is in the barest what minimum. So glucokinase helps majorly in blood glucose homeostasis, while hexokinase helps in glycolysis to make what ATP. So just know, you use one in ATP generation, which is hexokinase, and you use one in sugar level maintenance. Okay, now that is glucokinase. Doing fasting starvation, are you getting now? So hexokinase continues in fasting, so it is not affected by fasting starvation, because during fasting starvation glycolysis is inhibited. During fasting starvation glycolysis is inhibited and the body turned out towards gluconeogenesis. So but during fasting starvation and strenuous exercise, hexokinase is still active, but the only person that is inhibited is what? Glucokinase. Are you getting now? Now after meal, what is the function after meal? You get it now. So immediately after meal, what happens? The hexokinase is minimal. The working of hexokinase is minimal, but in the working of glucokinase is high because the body wants to yank all the whole glucose and distribute it to the tissues. Why? Because after meal your glucose level increases. We call it random blood sugar because immediately after meal the glucose level skyrocket. Are you getting now? When the glucose level skyrocket to about 120 to 130 milligram per day immediately after meal, so what do the body do? The body tries to take it back. Are you getting now? But if you eat small amount of food, are you getting now? What happens after meal? Hexokinase do not really work because the food now you have eaten, the glucose level is not high after meal. But your blood sugar level is just modulated between 60 to about 105 milligram per day every time. That should be your normal blood sugar level. But after meal it skyrockets. So when it skyrockets, what happens? We need to bring glucokinase to break them down. I get it, man. So we'll call it random blood sugar. So hexokinase only works in what we call the fasting blood sugar in the morning, while glucokinase works in the random blood sugar when the glucose level is high minimally after meal. You get it now? So since you have understood this, we have talked about the alternative name, the tissue distribution, the substrate specificity, the affinity, Kmax, Vmax, all of them. So what similarizes these two people together? What is similarities between these two? One, they act on carbohydrate metabolism. We agreed, Chibi. Hope you understand that. Act on carbohydrate what? Metabolism. Why? Because they are using the first steps of glycolysis what? Pathway. I get it. But glucokinase is used majorly in glycogen formation, which is glycogenesis. So you use glucokinase. I get it. But hexokinase is used basically in glycolysis generally. So you only use glucokinase in glycogenesis when you have increase in glucose what? Level. But both of them are still used in carbohydrate what? Metabolism. Both of them are located in the what? First irreversible steps of glycolysis. Remember, they are using the irreversible step. When there's high glucose, you bring in glucokinase from the nucleus of the liver, but when there's low glucose, you bring hexokinase. So they are used in the first irreversible step of what? Glycolysis. Next one, both of them phosphorylate glucose at carbon 6. So when glucose is absorbed by the muscle, especially using what? GLUT4. So GLUT4 is the glucose transporter that transports glucose to the muscle. So when they reach the muscle, they are absorbed, they are uptaken by the muscle cells and phosphorylated at carbon 6 to give glucose 6 phosphate. Both of them can do the same thing by what? Phosphorylating glucose at carbon 6 by what? ATP. So the next one is that both of them use ATP to donate phosphate. We talked about it. So when you are using what we call kinase reaction is to what? Take or add ATP. Kinase reaction helps to what? Take phosphate from ATP or give phosphate back to ADP to form ATP. So when you are donating phosphate, no, we don't need phosphate from anybody. We need phosphate from what? ATP. So when they donate phosphate, so ATP is broken down to ADP, donating phosphate to what? Carbon 6 to form glucose 6 phosphate. So when ATP is broken down to what? ADP and giving out phosphate, the product here is what? Glucose 6 phosphate and ADP. So ADP is a byproduct when ATP donates what? Phosphate. Are you getting now? So both helps to trap glucose into the cell as glucose 6 phosphate. So once you are gotten glucose 6 phosphate, it is irreversible. You cannot go back to glucose. You are already committed. Are you getting now? You are already committed. The only time where The only time where glucose 6-phosphate is dephosphorylated back to glucose is during gluconeogenesis. And in gluconeogenesis, what happens? Glucose 6-phosphate is broken down to what? Glucose. Are you getting me now? By removing the phosphate. But when you are dephosphorylating, you are not giving the phosphate back to ATP to form ATP. So you are only using the phosphatase by removing the phosphate without adding it to what? ATP. Are you getting me now? So once you have reached glucose 6-phosphate, you are already committed in the reaction. You cannot go back. Both are transferase enzymes, so both uses kinase. And what is kinase? Kinase is a transferase enzyme. What do you mean by transferase enzyme? By carrying phosphate from ATP to form ADP, giving it to carbon 6 to form glucose 6-phosphate. Now both of them participate in the what? Both of them participate in the regulation of glycogen utilization. So both of them does the same thing. So you can regulate them because they are first irreversible step. So they are activated allosterically by insulin. They are activated allosterically by ADP. They are activated by NAD+. They are activated by so many things. And they are also inhibited by ATP, glucagon, cortisol, a lot of things. Are you getting me? Now, what is the physiological significance here? What is hexokinase used for? One, they ensure continual utilization of glucose by the tissue. Yeah, so when a small amount of glucose comes, what happens? The body uses glucose for ATP. They enable tissues such as the brain, skeletal muscle to use glucose even at low amount. Like I said, also at low amount, glucose is being used up. Glucose is being used up to make ATP, but glucokinase cannot come when there's small amount of glucose, which means for glucokinase to come, it needs the glucose level has to be what? Big. But hexokinase is good because even though you have not eaten for a long time and you take, even though it's a biscuit or any confectionery, it could help you go by. Also, both of them trap glucose at glucose 6-phosphate. Also, hexokinase traps glucose at glucose 6-phosphate, but it's only inhibited when the glucose 6-phosphate level is high. So are you getting me now? So what is the function of what? Glucokinase. Now glucokinase is very, very easy. It functions as a glucose sensor in the beta cells of what? The pancreas. So immediately when there's high amount of glucose level, the beta cells of the pancreas secrete insulin to help or drive the reaction homeostatically, breaking down all the glucose to maintain the blood sugar level. And we also say they stimulate insulin at high blood sugar. So it's just like a sensor. When there's high blood sugar, the beta cells of the pancreas begin to secrete insulin. Are you getting now? To increase glucose uptake. So with the tissues, all the tissues start taking glucose because there's already glucose in the body. So if the glucose level is high in the blood, the tissues begin to take all the whole glucose transporters begin to transport glucose to every part in order to what? Take the glucose for what? Utilization. Okay, now just to make sure that the glucose level in the blood is just in a minimal level. Are you getting now? And the next one, now they ensure glycogen was synthesis. I told you glycogenesis is the what? Storage of glucose as glycogen. So when there's high blood sugar level, what happens? The body wants to send all the whole glucose for ATP formation and also let the body store some glucose in case we need them, but they are storing them as what? Glycogen. Hope you understand. And also lastly, it helps to maintain glucose what? Level. Okay, now so we have said everything about the differences, the comparison between hexokinase and what? Glucokinase. Is very, very easy. So I gave you the differences and the similarities and their physiological significance. I hope it all makes sense to you and you have understood everything I've talked about. So save this video, watch it, like it, send it to all your classmates because it will be very, very important for your exams. Okay, and also continue following my video, like, subscribe and share to everybody you know, so that we'll build this our channel and also more videos will be made for everybody. So I'll be seeing my next video here. Bye bye.